Hi, everybody. Super excited to be here. Yeah, my name's Timo Espinoza. I'm a legacy operator, social equity operator. We have a micro license up in Humboldt County, which entails manufacturing, distribution, and delivery. It's non-storefront retail. I've been in the industry my whole life. I'm a second generation distributor. My father was in the industry probably since the early 60s. So I've been around cannabis ever since I can remember. Um, just been really, when legalization happened in 2018, when it went fully rec, we were approached by some of our legacy connections up in Humboldt County that had property and wanted us to take it on and move forward with doing the whole legal thing. So we jumped in with both feet. I joined our academy last year as a mentee. We weren't licensed yet, so we went through the whole licensing process as being a part of our academy, which was really cool. And yeah, that's who I am. We got a brand called 4Gs. Me and my wife run the company. So I would like to say it's a woman-led facility because she kind of runs the show and does all the back work. And I just kind of concentrate on selling weed. We have multiple brands. We have 4Gs, which is a 4-gram eighth of light depth flower from Humboldt County. And then we have Dope Flavors, which is another social equity brand that we bring on, and we do the distro for them. And they have about 5 or 6 SKUs of indoor flower, concentrates, pre-rolls. We have Naughty Dabs, which is a woman-owned rosin brand, the only one on the market at this time, to my knowledge. And that's my wife's brand. We just launched about 3 months ago, been doing pretty good with that. And we also have a topical brand that is another social equity operator that he comes into our facility, he makes the topicals, and then we do the distro for them. So yeah, that's just who I am in a nutshell.
Thanks, Timo. And Morris, Kelly, how did you start SF Roots? And how did you get into the whole cannabis game from day one?
Hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Morris Kelly. I'm the founder of SF Roots and the founder and CEO of Hello San Francisco, which is a social equity operated license out of San Francisco, California. We have a manufacturing license. We have partnerships with cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing type 6, which kind of vertically aligns us. How I got into the space, I grew up selling cannabis in San Francisco. Grew up getting arrested for selling cannabis in San Francisco. Once I became 18, somebody was like, "You pay this guy, he gets you a delivery license," and that's all I needed to hear to try to start figuring out legal cannabis. At that point in time, I still always had, a white male as the face of my business, because, for instance, one of my grow houses ended up getting raided. My house ended up getting raided. I ended up going to jail and having to fight a case. And during that time, fighting the case was when I created SF Roots. I knew that with legalization on the horizon, I wouldn't be able to afford the licenses for cultivation in the way that they were being issued. So I decided to build a brand, used my cultivation resources and hit the streets and just really built a brand. And once legalization came, we had distributors and we had cultivations growing our cannabis, and we were ready to switch over. Since getting a licensed facility, kind of, the same show as Timo, we open the doors to other social equity operators. We have a number of social equity brands we white label for and do consulting for, just to help them get off the ground. So yeah, just that's who I am and happy to be here.
Morris has been a phenomenal mentor and just an incredible guiding light for a lot of folks in our program too. Before we get into it, I know DJ and I are sick of hearing this, but Schedule 1 drug, do everything at your own risk. We're just talking about our own experiences, but are not giving you any legal advice. But I dropped this in the chat, and it's super helpful to know what you're all focusing on. It looks like Kyra is, I hope I'm saying your name right, is pursuing a degree in accounting. If you are interested in distro, so we're gonna get into all of this. But thank you for sharing what you're up to. So we're based in California. I know that you're across the country. We're going to use California as an example, but if you want to share specifically a few regs that are going on in your city or state, feel free to drop it in the chat. In terms of California supply chain, it is a little interesting. Every single license type or every part of the supply chain needs its own license. And so you can technically stack licenses, but for the most part, a lot of equity operators will have one license type or a micro license like Timo that have multiple opportunities where you can work with multiple parts of the supply chain in one license. So for example, cultivation, it deals with flower and biomass solely. And if you're a cultivator, you can't technically test or distribute your own product unless you have another license type. Then there's manufacturing, which is a type 6, which is non-volatile, type 7, which is volatile, and then an edible kitchen license. So for example, if you have a manufacturing license, but you don't have an edible kitchen license, you can't always produce certain types of products at your facility. And then when going into distro, for example, and Timo's going to speak more about this, distribution has to deal with packaging a product and post-packaging. So if you're trying to create a pre-roll, package any type of rosin, whatever it may be, that has to deal with a distro license. Technically you can also like co-pack, which is the nice thing about it, and it's a little bit more versatile. Mind you, there's different definitions for every license in every jurisdiction. So, I mean, we'll talk about this from the California's perspective, but sometimes a distribution license has different parameters in, let's say, Detroit or in Philadelphia. So it's really important that you read your regs and you understand those definitions up front. In terms of testing, for example, there's a company called SC Labs. They test your products to make sure that you get a certificate of analysis that actually shows what you're marketing and what you're saying is in your product is in your product. So that's everything from percentage of THC, CBD, even terpene profile in your product, and that will show up on your COA. And there are different types of tests for that. Testing labs also can test soil levels, whether or not there's any types of mold, pesticides usage. And so what people sometimes don't understand or don't realize is that testing labs are a little bit more versatile than we even realize. They test products, but they also will test, let's say if you're going after the cultivation license, or the company you're working with is going after a cultivation license, and you want to make sure that there's no like specific chemicals in the on the land that you're potentially going to buy or lease. You can actually send a sample of that soil to a testing lab to make sure that you're getting what you're paying for. Delivery, that is more so along the lines of, let's say, a DTC platform. So example for that could be Grassador or Ease, for those of you who know any of those platforms. That is more of a product to the end consumer. So think of like Amazon. You order something from Amazon, it gets to you, and it's all of the it's similar to distro, but it's going from a warehouse directly to the consumer. And thank you, Nadir, for throwing that down. So that's a different type of license that you need. In terms of retail and consumption lounges, those are two different licenses, unfortunately, as well. And to sell a product, you have to have a retail license. And to actually have a consumption lounge, which are pretty rare in California at the very least, and across the country, there are very few of them. You do need to have a specific lounge for those. So if you want to smoke on site, consume on site, have any type of edibles, you do need to have some type of consumption license. Does anybody have any questions about this so far? Because I know I just spewed a lot of information at you. Last mile delivery is an important term that Nandir mentioned. It's basically, and Timo could probably define this a bit better, but it's going from a warehouse or any type of hub and spoke facility to your end consumer or to a retailer. Any questions on that?
I could just also add in one more license that's not in here is an event license.
Oh, that's a really good one. Yeah, and often overlooked. And Timo, could you explain the event license?
Yeah, so an event license is it's basically a license to throw cannabis events. So for example, Morris and I participated in Carnival in San Francisco a couple months back, where the license holder was Gifted Doja. And they basically got the event license, they secured a space at a festival and were able to have retail of cannabis at the event and consumption at the event. So that's what a retail event license does.
Okay, so for context, if you're starting your own company, that's one thing, but if you are, this is helpful to know. Generally, if you're looking to get a job at any of these types of companies, you ultimately do want to know how these different licenses engage with each other, and you do want to know the regs for your jurisdiction. That's something that I would say like 85% of people don't read, unfortunately, and will just help you like through and through in your career in cannabis. But thank you, Timo. That's super helpful. Morris, could you share a little bit more about cultivation and licensing?
Yeah, I think one other thing about the event license that's probably overlooked is it's usually the cheapest and the least hassle to get. I know at least for California, you literally only needed an office space and you were able to get a cannabis event license. So that's something to look at if you're an entrepreneur trying to get your foot in the door. That might be an easier place to start. But moving on to cultivation. Cultivation is an essential part of the supply chain because that's where everything begins. A lot of times, what happened in California was you had a lot of old growers get pushed out of the way for new corporate growers. And what that did was it kind of put a lot of unstable product on the market. So with that being said, always never overlook, a traditional grower, I would say. That's usually where the good stuff comes from. But looking at it from a job aspect, I definitely know that when I was running cultivation for myself, one of the biggest things that we ran into was people coming into the cultivation with their own idea or mentality of what goes on. So my biggest suggestion surrounding cultivation is go into it just like as an open, empty book, ready to soak in all the tutelage from that operation. Because once you get into the industry, you'll notice that no two grows are exactly the same. So it's going to be very important to kind of just like think about it like being on a baseball team, and you play for one team, they have one specific style of playing. You go to another team, they have another specific style of playing. So that's going to be very key. And then going into the different roles and responsibilities in the grow, you usually start off with your trimmers. That's going to be like your kind of most entry level into cultivation. The easiest way to get into a cultivation, if that's what you're just dying to do. Cultivations are always usually looking for more trimmers. It's a good way to get your foot in the door and work your way up. Trimming, the responsibilities of that are usually to cut down the plants, hang the plants, they'll dry, and then after the curing process, you'll go in and you'll make them pretty for presentation for the store. Past the trimmers, you usually have your first level of your grow staff, which is on the floor of the cultivation. Those are the people that are going to be tending to the plants daily, that'll be watering. In cultivation, you have a vegetation cycle. And your vegetation cycle, that's when you know, you're going to basically be training the plants to grow in a specific pattern that you want them. Depending on how your facility is built out, will depend on how you train your plants, and that'll be the job during that phase. Say if you have 2 rows of lights, LEDs are usually ran in 2 rows on top of each other. You might only have 6 feet in between the lights and the plants. You're going to start off those plants growing with as many legs as possible, and legs would be branches. So, you know, you start off with your traditional 1 branch, it grows into 2. There's a mechanism called topping that they do that'll make it branch out into more, so that when you're growing your canopy, you'll have a nice full canopy with no holes. Or if you were growing the more traditional way with, say, HPS, which is high pressured sodium lights, you might have more room to let your plants get taller, more bushier, and you would train them in a different way. And then you have your master growers, or I guess that's kind of a lame term to use, but it's kind of, I don't know how else you'd say it in a clinical educational space. But you have your master growers, who are your lead technicians, I guess you would say, for your grow facility, that are going to be responsible for what type of nutrients, what type of scheduling, what type of lights, just like the overall maintenance of the facility, that makes sure all these people know where to go. And that's kind of just like a basic flow through the cultivation and what type of jobs are available. Timo, would you want to add anything to that?
Nah, cultivation is that's a whole other beast. Yeah, you pretty much covered that.
All right. And then here in California, the different licensing types that we have are varied. We do have, like, you would say, it's technically called a cottage grower. That would be like your small craft cultivator. You know, they probably wouldn't, I believe the spacing on that is about 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. And those type of licenses are used for like either really craft small operations that are tied to other licenses, or a bigger license will have those licenses just to do R&D on an outside facility. And excuse me, before that, we have a nursery license. So as you can imagine, with cannabis being a crop grown indoors, it has about an 8-week lifespan once it's into flower. So these plants are always need for more constant production. So nurseries are the foundation usually of the industry, because they're the ones who are supplying the growers with the plants, the genetics that are needed to sustain the market. So then you have nursery, cottage grow. You do have a breeding license that allows you to essentially mate and cross different genetics of the plants to produce new genetics for the market. And then from there, you just have your different size cultivations that vary between indoor cultivation, mixed light cultivation, and outdoor cultivation. So the difference between the three are outdoor cultivation. That's going to be your traditional agriculture crop. You put it out in the beginning of the year, you harvest it in the end of the year, and it's really just doing its thing under Mother Nature. Here in California, we have some of the best climates for cannabis, so it's very, you know, we are able to produce some of the best outdoor cannabis that you would have a hard time telling the difference between outdoor, light depth, and indoor just with the untrained eye. So that's kind of like one of our things that we have really good here. But say if you were in Michigan, you wouldn't be able to have the same growing conditions for a year-round plant as the same, right? So it will differ between your climates and where you are. And then the next one we have is mixed light and light depth. This will be your greenhouse facilities where they still operate off the sun, but they do have the added lights that give the plants an extra boost And then they also have a lot of times light deprivation, which is a shade that covers the top of the greenhouse. So you're still able to use the sunlight. But say if it's this time of year where you're getting 12 hours of light, or no, we're getting more than 12 right now. We're getting 16 hours of light. Your plants won't go into flower. So the shade will go over your greenhouse and then induce flowering. It'll kick it into those 12 and 12, even though outside of the greenhouse it's still at 16 and 8. And then we have our indoor cultivation, which is kind of like the staple of the industry. It's the prettiest, it's the stinkiest, it's like, just the fashion model cannabis. And then again, it's just being able to create the most pristine, perfect conditions for cannabis to thrive, because you're able to control everything basically by a dial. If the plants are too hot, you turn it down. The plants are too cold, you turn it down. The plants need more water. You're basically mimicking the environment to produce perfect cannabis. And I think that covers cultivation and licensing. Unless are we doing questions, Hill, or are we just
We're gonna
running
do
through?
questions at the end.
I got
Okay.
a little fun fact about the cultivation and the light depth. Being in Humboldt County, doing a lot of our work up there, I have the opportunity and the pleasure to deal with some of these legacy growers that have been doing this for many years. And the stories that they tell me and the history that's told is something that I try to hold on to and try to preserve. So I want to share that with you guys. Light depth, what Morris was talking about, where they cover the plant for a certain amount of time. That started during the 90s when they were having the camp raids in Humboldt County, and the helicopters were flying above to look to see who was growing these crops. So the farmers got smart, and they knew that if they covered the crop, that from helicopter sight, they couldn't tell if they were growing tomatoes, they couldn't tell what they were growing. So that was a way for them to camouflage their outdoor grows once they started getting cracked down on in, like, say, the late 80s, early 90s, when the war on drugs was really heavy. But from that grew light depth, right? And they perfected it. So now it's to the point where some of these farmers are so good, like Morris said, like you might have a hard time telling the difference between light depth and indoor if they're doing it right. So that was it. Just want to give you guys that.
Thanks, Timo. That's a dope fact. I didn't know that. Manufacturing and extraction. Morris and Timo, could you share a little bit more about, how this specific license works?
I'll let Timo handle the extraction. He extracts more. I just use what he makes.
Yeah, manufacturing and extraction. We do have a manufacturing license. It's a type 6. So the difference between type 6 and type 7, as you see here, is non-volatile and volatile. So what that basically means is a type 6 manufacturing license, we can't use any volatile solvents, things that are combustible. So like the propanes and the butanes and all the tanes that blow up, we don't touch any of that in our place. But solventless, non-volatile, we're able to do things like create water hash, right? Where all you're using is ice water. So that's the water is the solvent, right? So it's non-combustible, and that's perfectly good. With a type 6 manufacturing license, we can also do, if I'm not mistaken, we can do infused pre-rolls, whereas if you have a distribution license, you could only do pre-rolls with flour and that's it. But if you have a type 6 manufacturing license, you could turn it up a notch and add, whether it's hash, rosin, diamonds, whatever it is. All right, go ahead, Morris.
I can clarify. So basically with the type 6 license, we're not allowed to produce all of the extracts that Timo is referring to, but we are allowed to make products with them and from them. So we're not allowed to do the actual extraction, but we can still create products from them. So we are able to create anything from a pre-roll to a beverage to an edible. That all falls under that type 6 license, and under that type 7 license is kind of where that heavy equipment comes in, those explosion proof rooms, just that heavy lifting. So that's like the big differentiation between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Inside our facility, currently what we're doing on the manufacturing side, just so everyone knows, we have a brand by the name of Paul Wells. He's a social equity operator. And he basically, we do a management deal where they can come into our facility and they're able to make their topical. So he makes it out of biomass and he infuses it into a cocoa butter type of product. So that's one of the things we do at our with our manufacturing license, on top of doing like infused pre-rolls and things of that nature.
So this is kind of like a general high level workflow of a manufacturer, like what a manufacturer goes through when they're creating a product. We're getting like quick on time already, so I'm gonna blow through this. Feel free to screen cap this if you want. I feel like this is gonna be available to all of you afterwards as well. Okay, so jobs in manufacturing. Timo, could you run through this, please?
Sure. So in our facility, we're very, very small, tight-knit, little small enterprise, but I'm like the CEO, I'm the driver, the deliverer, the carrier, the boxes, clean the bathroom, do it all. What we do in this manufacturing extraction, like you got the people that are doing the pre-rolls, right? That are actually sitting there rolling the pre-rolls, putting them together, infusing them. You got the people that are making the hash. You got the hash washers that are washing the hash. Are they pressing the rosin? They're using heat to press the hash to make the rosin. So these are the kind of like the different roles that you have in manufacturing. So if it's something that you're trying to get into, like if you're into washing hash, then this is where you want to go to pursue that, right? To go apply for a job at a manufacturing site, watch what's going on. You probably start off in the beginning washing bags or cleaning up the equipment. Next step would be actually hands-on with the product and making the hash, and it works up from there.
Awesome. And so this is a bit of an org chart, a processing org chart. It gives you an idea of how different products and different outputs require different tech teams. It's just kind of a helpful way to like understand it all and visualize it. And distribution. Timo has a distribution license, and as you mentioned, it's called Seventh Wave. And so run us through how distro license works, Timo.
So a distribution license is pretty much the bulk of our business. And what that entails is everything from the packaging of the product, picking up of the product. So let's start with the cultivation side, like Morris said, that's where everything begins, right? So as a brand, you need a distribution company or license to do these things for you. First off, you got to pick up your flower, right? So the distribution company goes out there in their van, they pick up your flower, bring it to the distribution site. Next, package the flower. No, next is testing the flower. So that the lab will come to our facility, take their sample batch test, come back, report what the results are. Once we get the results, then we're able to package your product into packaging, put them in jars or mylars if that's what they're going in, box it in a final box, get it all labeled out. And then next after that begins the distribution to the retailer. In between there's sales involved too. So perfect distribution company, I guess you would say, would be a full service distribution company where they will do the sales for you, do the distribution, everything that I just said. And basically that's what the distribution company does, right? They sell your product, they package your product, and they get it to where it needs to go.
And Morris, from the perspective of you as SF Roots, could you kind of give some insight on how you work with a distribution company? I know that you kind of self-distribute, but I think it would be helpful to explain like what an MSA is and how you as a brand would work with a distro company, let's say with Timo.
So if I was an unlicensed brand,
Yeah.
oh, so if I was an unlicensed brand and I have a nice following, I got a great marketing idea, and I really think that people would believe in my product and want to purchase what I have to offer, then I would approach Timo and I would ask Timo for a licensing deal. And what that licensing deal would basically entail is I would give Timo the rights to use my brand. You know, depending on if I've already found a source for my product, or I'd be relying on Timo to help me with that, then, you know, Timo would then have the right to package flower in my brand, use my logos, and kind of how I would take payment for that would be in the charge of the packaging. So my job in this licensing agreement would be to market and sell and brand, make sure that the brand is strongly represented. So when Timo goes out with this package that I've licensed him the brand, that everything that he packages with my name on it, he has to pay me $2 for, you know, then, you know, it makes it kind of like an ecosystem, right? Now I'm out here, I'm pushing the brand. Timo is able to go complete the sales. And then I have a licensed brand on the California market that's gone through all the proper channels. The only thing that I would say about that in California is that we would negotiate the price beforehand so that it's not labeled as a profit. It's more labeled as a cost of good, as a marketing cost, because that cost was determined before the sale of the product. So there's little things like that that are able to get operators like me and Timo, you know, originally our first shots in getting into this industry, you know, starting through loopholes. But, you know, that's just kind of coming in it from the, I guess, you know, being an underrepresented group in the cannabis space. But that's initially how you would go after it. And that would work in multiple states as well.
So a few jobs in distribution, let's say there are quite a few companies in distribution, but you know, there's smaller groups like Morris and Timo's companies. A bit of context, in California, there's Navis and Herbal. There are quite a few other ones, but those are kind of the main two heavy hitters in California. So there's distribution and sales and accounting managers. Those are often on a performance basis with like a base salary, general ops and managers, distribution driver specialists, and cannabis delivery drivers. And those are more entry-level positions.
Yeah. And just to talk on the delivery, like what we would charge a company if they wanted us to say, hey, we have 50 pounds of cannabis in Humboldt County, can you take it to LA? We would then just charge a distribution fee for the travel. And we charge like, you know, $1.50 a mile and $40 an hour for the driver, something like that.
And I don't know if anybody has any of these questions, because I know that you're saving them for Q&A, but feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll address them as necessary if they come up. So often for distro, the general fee for companies specifically in California, it's around 10 to 20%, depending on whether or not there's tech or like data stacks that they're going to share with you. And so those are certain, I mean, for specifically Kyra, like if you're thinking about accounting or if you're working at a cannabis company for a brand, those are certain things that you want to take into account for your margins.
And people are always looking for sales. So,
People
I mean, that's a way to get in. If you're good at selling, doing sales, I mean, that's an easy open because everyone's looking for sales reps constantly.
Definitely. And it's all cash for them. Morris, could you share a little bit more about retail and consumption licenses and the types of positions available for a company? Let's like say Grill RX.
All right, retail. So in retail, you have really two standard licenses. You have a retail license and you have a delivery license. They might be different names state to state. You know, California, I think it's brick and mortar and offsite retail. But those two are usually your two cornerstone licenses for retail. Your brick and mortar is usually a standalone location or not necessarily standalone, but it's a storefront. So that's like a business that you'd be able to walk into, see the cannabis, purchase cannabis, and walk out of. And the delivery is, you know, just how it sounds. It's more of like the Domino's effect where, you know, you can hop on your computer, you can hop on your phone, pick what you want, and it'll be at your house 30 to 45 minutes. Now, when we're going into the different jobs that are held under these, there are definitely corporate level jobs that are responsible for administration level stuff. So it'll be the same things that you would find in a normal company, such as HR, you know, compliance. You'd have your C-suite. You would have, you know, all the things that your accountants, everything that makes the normal business run day to day. But on the flip side, what you would also have are your bud tenders. You would have here in California, if it's a medicinal club, you might have a nurse that would be able to help people with the benefits of cannabis. And then you would also have your buyer, which would be responsible for making the relationships with the brands, also responsible for making sure they know kind of how the market is moving. So you don't have last year's special, you know, boobop on the shelf when nobody wants it anymore. Then you also have like your marketing channels, which are really big in retail because they have to drive the sales of these products. They're like the last stop. They're the last stop. So it's very easy for a retail location to accept these products. And if they don't have a good marketing strategy, that they then end up sitting on the products. And once the products are expired, if, you know, for me personally, if a retail has sat on my product for 6 months and it expired, I'm not gonna necessarily like want to do something special for them, right? Because it's kind of like you should have called me 3 months ago and I would have helped you sell this product, right? So that's like a really big aspect to these dispensaries. And I'd say, you know, that buyer position is definitely like that's the key to making sure that you know, you have fresh products on your shelf, you have good quality products on your shelf. And then you know, your bud tenders, that's like the first line of a retail. I would suggest that, you know, if you're really serious about getting into the industry, starting off as a bud tender, because you're then able to meet the patients that you would be serving in any other position of this industry. And that's like something that's so vital that a lot of people coming in from the top never get to see, or never get those opinions, or never get those testimonials, or never get the chance to learn how the plant actually affects people person to person, right? So you know, I always suggest anybody trying to get into the industry, start off as a bud tender, because, you know, A, you have to learn to hold that position, so it'll help you learn. And then B, you're going to be repeating this and learning more from your fellow bud tenders and from your consumers, that, you know, eventually after a couple months that, you know, you kind of just pick that stuff up like it's second nature. And then you're doing research on yourself as you find the benefits and how it can help yourself. So, and, you know, it gives you in prime position to be able to try the products too at a discount. So I think that's pretty important as well, is being able to actually try the products and know what you're talking about, right? One of the things that I love doing is trying the products. We came out with some shrimp chips, and I spent the month before they came out to the public just eating as many shrimp chips as I could, because, you know, I wanted to know what they did to you. And then plus, you know, when I'm out in public, I wanted to be able to eat the shrimp chips. So I think that, you know, getting to know the product, and, you know, just getting to know the consumers of the product is vitally important. And yes, they were flavored. We had a spicy flavor.
Real quick, Timo, what do buyers, this is coming from Scotty, what do buyers look for in your brand when you're speaking to buyers at a dispensary?
For our brand specifically, or just what are buyers looking for in general? I mean, I could talk on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
on what Morris was saying, I've had situations where I've met buyers that I can tell have no experience, right? They're smelling my product, and it's an outdoor product, possibly that I'm showing them this outdoor product, and they're smelling it, they're looking at it, and they're like, wow, is this indoor? And right there off the top of my head, I'm like, man, this guy does not know what he's looking at. And this is the buyer, you know what I mean? So the best buyers that I've ran across are people that have been bud tenders and been through that and know what they're looking at and have that experience. So those are some of the better experiences that I've had. What the buyers are looking for is they're looking to move product, really. I mean, at the end of the day, that's their job, is to move product. It's a very sought after position. I sometimes like to say that they have a God complex, you know what I mean? Because everybody's always throwing samples at them, always trying to do whatever they can to win over the buyers. So some of them, it tends to go to their head a little bit. So when I'm in front of a buyer, I'm just really doing everything I can to let them know what we do to help push the product. The product is one thing, yeah. And if you have good product, that kind of speaks for itself. But they want a little bit more than that. They want to see, what can you do as a brand to help us sell this product? What kind of digital assets do you have? What are your patient appreciation days are going to look like when you come here in your demos? What does that look like? So in my opinion, I think that is something that the buyers are more motivated about when they see that you have that. Just now, you just say, this is my product, this is what I got, and I really don't have no marketing plan on how to sell it. That's your job. You know what I mean? That's kind of not how you want to come at them.
That's a big one. So like, for example, Timo did a BOGO, buy one, get one sale immediately at Kika's dispensary. And that created a lot of foot traffic as well. And sometimes you're taking a hit as a brand, but sometimes it's worth it because you're helping growth of your sales. Real quick, because I know that we're hitting on time, but this is a popcorn question to everybody here. Feel free to unmute yourself. Which licenses does a non-plant touching brand engage with? So think cookies. I'm trying to think of another brand, but that's non-plant touching. But let's say that you created a brand that you didn't have a license. What types of licenses would you be working with? I'm going to call on someone.
Retailer or
Go for it. Oh, yeah. Sorry, who has your hand up?
Greetings, my name is DeAndre Smith. I'm currently my doctor in pharmacy with a minor in food science at FAMU. I would say the event license would be the best because you're not touching, you'll be able to host the events and have the products come in and you can still do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good license. But let's say if you were a brand and you had a product line, which licenses would you be working with to distribute, to cultivate? What licenses would you be engaging with? Maybe a better way of putting the question. Go for it.
I guess no, you would want to work with someone to distribute.
You're on the right track.
Okay, because I was going to say what came to my mind was distribution and retail. So if you wanted to be able to have a storefront yourself, I'm guessing, and then if you want to be able to pass it on to somebody to sell.
Yep, that's right too. Scotty, do you have something?
Would it be manufacturing too, like wax and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Keep going. If you're a brand, you do need a test.
I mean, you need labs, you need delivery.
Here's a
what
trick
else?
question. I was fucking with you. It's
Yeah,
essentially
everybody- Everybody was correct.
Yeah, everyone was
One
right.
One thing I will say is that about that event license is that we didn't say earlier is that if you do have an event license, that means that you are licensed in the recreational market and you can conduct business with other licenses. So at that point, you would not need a licensing deal. If I had an event license, I could go straight to Timo and say, hey, Timo, I need you to make me these pre-rolls. Timo can make me the pre-rolls and we could go on about our day without any extra paperwork. So that's another caveat about the event license that people don't realize is that it's like a couple $100 and you could do business at that. It's a license to do business with other cannabis businesses.
There's a few licenses. That's why like looking into the regs are really important because that's a really good point. Like to have multiple streams of revenue for your license is huge, especially with cannabis being so expensive. And it changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So specifically in California, the event license is clutch, and also distribution is clutch because you can actually manufacture out a distribution license. I'm not sure if this is still the same, but in Detroit, they had a micro license, and in California, micro license is fantastic because you can do multiple things at the license. But in Detroit, if you had a micro license and let's say you had cultivation, retail, and manufacturing, apparently for the regs, you couldn't interact with any other business. And that's kind of a pain in the ass because then you're not able to make up for any, let's say if one crop doesn't do well, you can't buy product or you can't manufacture anybody else's product. And so you're kind of screwed. But yes, this was a trick question and you all got it right. And this is primarily because DJ said he wanted an interactive something to get you guys involved. All right, last thing, there's tech and then there's ancillary industries. And so I don't want you to be concerned that you have to be plant touching. Obviously, it's incredible if you are and you're working at a plant touching company, but for a lot of people, it's a little intimidating. There's a lot of facets to being a compliant company with a lot of regulatory bodies. It's expensive, and I'm not trying to sway you against it, but just to put you on to other opportunities. All of these verticals and licenses and parts of the industry all have ancillary needs. So everything from tech, legal, and we'll get into that. But to keep in mind, every part of the supply chain also requires some type of tech software. So SaaS companies, so software as a service, they're not 280 compliant, which is tax regulation, which considers cannabis as a Schedule I drug, which taxes it as a Schedule I drug, and means that you cannot write off your COGS. And so all of these companies, for the most part, are 280 exempt and are technically cannabis adjacent companies. So that may be interesting for a few of you to look into. And at these types of companies, there are sales jobs, solution architects. Those are people who find out how to do something properly. Customer service, product managers, sales engineers, engineers in general with UX, UI. And then for all of these supply chain pieces, there's legal, finance, marketing, sales, and creative. And that's just something to keep in mind. What was that, Morris?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. And so just so you know, there's all these other opportunities that you can look into. And yeah, that's just something to keep in mind if you're transitioning and you're specializing in something that's a little bit more traditional, you can still apply it into cannabis, even though it's not cannabis specific.
Definitely. There's also I know there's people in Humboldt County that have specific businesses catered to cannabis, like security companies, that their specialty is to come put security cameras and do things like that. So any walk of life, most industries will intertwine with cannabis on some level. We have engineers up there that specifically specialize on building greenhouses, specifically specialize on building indoor facilities. And these are just construction people that were doing construction 3 years ago. And now they just brought that to this industry. So more than likely, whatever industry you're in can somehow weave into this.
Another one that isn't mentioned here, and I know that this isn't about supply chain, but is public policy. I saw that a few of you are in Atlanta. That really sets the groundwork for all of these license types and how these license types can work amongst each other, but also their social equity programs. And so if that's something that you can start advocating for now and getting a foothold in, whether it's working with a nonprofit, just engaging with one, or lobbying for independently, and that seems like a big word, but just advocating for yourself, showing up to a local city council meetings, it's a really good way to start creating the groundwork for your cannabis industry in your local area.
Hey, screw creating the groundwork. You guys need to be out there. I'm also a board member on the equity trade certification. And this is something that we believe in deeply, is that you guys have to be involved with writing the laws, and don't let them write the laws for you. Because if you allow them to think of you as an afterthought, that's all you will be in this industry. So it is extremely important to show up, show out, and be in those rooms and making sure that they know that you're there and you know that you're getting that information to share with your people. So when it's time for them to show up, when you need that backup, they can show up. But, you know, don't be intimidated. Don't, you know, the political system is, you know, it's all a game, right? It's all the same game. It's, as soon as you learn how to play the rules, oh, all these guys do is pay somebody to sit in here all day. Well, I can't pay them, but I got a day to go sit. And you go get those same opportunities just as them. Go have your voices heard just as them. So your rights are involved in the making of these legislations that will be affecting you and the well-being of your family's futures.
That's a really good point, Morris. So an example of this would be Kika Keith. She was the first Black woman-owned dispensary in LA that opened up. And she actually had a group of social equity applicants that would go into city council meetings and local meetings and just write notes and disseminate it to her friends and family and other social equity applicants. And so oftentimes these meetings are in the middle of the day when, you know, you probably are in school or in work hours. But if you can kind of, and this is what she did, she had a group of elders that were in the community that were retired and had the time to sit in these meetings. But you could also do this with a friend. And so if it's someone that can take a day off here and there and you can kind of tag team and then disseminate the information amongst yourselves, as long as one person is in there that is an advocate on your side, that can make a huge difference. And sometimes it's just a matter of showing up and listening. So on that note, if you have any questions or you want to discuss any of this further, I know that we're going to get into Q&A, please go and follow Morris and Timo and their companies. They have some incredible things that they will story tell, and you can follow along and everything they're up to. And if you're ever in California, Timo's at Stizzy. And where are you at right now? Where else are you at, Timo?
I'm in Stizzy. You can find our products in Nug, Gorilla RX, as she mentioned, with Kika. We like that. Since they opened, like, they've really showed a lot of support for us as we've done for them. And it's like really creating that ecosystem, you know what I mean? So we rock really hard with them. Who else? Verde, Off the Charts. We're in quite a few places up and down the state.
And Morris is in like 60 locations, but Morris, could you name a few?
Oh, the same as Timo. I'm riding his coattails.
Lion.
And then, you know, we actually have a direct to consumer site coming on soon, which will be www.sfroots.com. You can go there now. And then we also have started the Crypto Culture Cannabis Club, the CCC Club, where we're, you know, making sure that we have representation in the Web3 space, not only one as cannabis operators, but also two as people of color. So I would love for you guys to join me on all of those. And yeah, our website, Instagram, Twitter, we're keeping it lit. We're doing events in New York and Michigan next month and in California. So if you guys are in any of those places, or if you're just curious about crypto and cannabis, I'd love to chat.
And if any of you are in Humboldt County and you're up north and you want to check out the flavor, the culture up there, come hit me up. You know, we could do a facility walk, check out what's going on, come check out the site, come check out some cool flower, you know, hit me up.
All right. So does anybody else have any questions? We threw a lot of information at you, so.
Feel free to unmute yourself, hop on.
DeAndre?
Thank you for calling. Thank you guys for so much wisdom, man. I really do appreciate it. A lot of insight. Timo, you touched on a lot of great things. I have a question for each presenter, but I'm gonna let some other people go. Right now, I currently work for True Leaf as an indoor agriculture specialist. So I've been doing it for a month, and it's been really repetitive when you're just doing the same thing. And you mentioned topping. That's something we do, and we do softball approach as well. So it's just good to hear you use these terms, and I know it's not going in vain. I also looked on your LinkedIn. It said you graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. So how do you think that helped you prepare you for what you're going through now versus somebody who's, like you're saying, they don't know the industry because they're more corporate? How do you think that helped you?
I think that helped me tremendously. Like, that's where our value is, you know what I mean? Because I grew up, I mean, at the age of 13, I was already selling pounds of weed, you know what I mean? So all through high school, I was selling weed to people in high school and just going on and on. So I never in a million years thought cannabis was going to go legal. And I got to a point in my life where I went really, really square. You know what I mean? And I kind of stopped selling weed and I really went into the workforce and I did that. And then when legalization happened, it was just like, wait a minute, this is my game. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to let no one else own this game. So I did what I could to be a part of it. And what I've noticed, and coming as a social equity applicant compared to a corporate company, is like, we know what our people want, right? Because we come from our people. Someone else that's corporate is trying to get into our market. We already know the market. So it's very easy for us, not easy, but it's easier for us to relate to our people and to get the product that the people want. It's kind of like comparing it to baseball, right? I always make this comparison. Like these corporate companies, they have 3 strikes. They're able to go up, strike out, and come back up to bat. You know, let's bring something to market, see if it works. Oh, it didn't work, and let's just try something else. We don't have that luxury. You know what I mean? We go up to bat. If we don't hit a home run, we got to at least get on base. There's no strikeout. You know what I mean? So we got to choose wisely what our product is, make sure that's something that I would take, that my people would like and enjoy. And 9 times out of 10, you know, you're halfway there with that. You know, these companies are paying big money to learn what we already grew up learning.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. And then I'm working myself with my club on campus to actually integrate the different majors, different professions into the cannabis industry, because so many people don't know the opportunities are there. We need the engineers, the marketing specialists, and all. So thank you for all your insight.
Yes, sir.
Also fascinating that you're at Trulieve, one of the very few licenses out there. Scotty.
All right, I have a very specific cultivation question. What determines the wash percentage on a strain?
Mo, you're on mute.
Morris is on mute. Are you talking about washing like hash?
Yeah, hash.
Oh, that's just trial and error. You learn what genetics are good washers, and usually you look for those genetics when you're looking for stuff to wash. So everything, you got Girl Scout cookies, right? And Girl Scout cookies is like now I can't remember what's in it. It's a F1 Durban and
Cherry pie, I think.
Cherry pie and OG. So you know the parents of the strain, and then you'd say, okay, well, if it has two of those parents are good washers, then you're going to say 9 times out of 10, one of these offsprings are going to be good washers, right? Those genetics will carry through. So another thing with cannabis is like everything is like genetics, very similar to a family, as to where, if I'm 6'6", if I marry or if I have kids with a woman that's 5 foot, now we could have kids that are 5 feet. We could have kids that are 4'9". We could have kids that are 6'6", 6'7", right? Now, between the different variations, those are the different variations of type of cannabis plants that you'll have when you are breeding and creating those offsprings. And then from there you go, okay, well, maybe my room, I don't have a lot of room. I need those 4'9" plants, right? Now that might be one characteristic I'm looking for, but this other plant over here, it's like real stinky. It's like, it's real resinous. And those are the other characteristics I'm looking for. So now I'll take those two and I'll make another generation, because those two characteristics are the ones that I'm looking for in those offspring. So now that next round of offspring, I'll have some tall, I'll have some short, but they should all pretty much have like the resiny, the smell, because that's what, we're looking for both of those characteristics from each parent. So now, as you're dialing in your genetics, it usually takes about 6 to 7 of those crossback before you lock it in. And then you have a universe. That's when you create a new strain that you're able to pop the seeds. All the strains will come out uniform, but it takes the process of picking your genetics and, really growing everything out, finding which ones are the ones you really want, putting them back together and going through it and locking it in. I guess that's, the way that I call it.
And it's all strain specific. You know what I mean? There's some strains like, let's say Blue Dream. If you try to wash that, you're not going to get anything out of it. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. But if you wash, like say a GMO, it's going to dump. You're going to get a big return. So, those are the things you got to kind of think about as it's all strain specific. And it goes for growing too, right? You might grow a plant, a certain strain might grow, but might yield very little, but might be fire. And then you got this other plant that yields a lot, but it's not as good as the one that yields a little bit, and that's what Morris says. You start mixing them all up so you can get the characteristics that you want.
Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions?
I have more. If they think that it might be in the chat.
Yeah, send them over in the chat.
Yeah.
Or just feel free to ask them.
Okay. Well, Morris, I've seen you talk about a lot just the how the process of growing is. I work at Trulieve and I always ask a lot of questions. What about their growing process? Because they now have like the 6-inch cubes they use, and it's like really mass production. What company you see has the best mass production layout? Because you said every company grows differently.
I'd say in California, it's hard to say the best, right? Because you got so many different factors that go into it. Like, you have more money than God. Yeah, you can build the best and biggest and baddest facility, right? But that doesn't mean you're going to have the personal touch to all the plants to be able to grow the best cannabis, right? So, and truthfully, I haven't, I guess it's because I'm in California, we kind of have a standard of growing that, you're not going to survive if you're not even on that standard, right? You're going to be a hay farmer. People are going to want to buy your product to just throw in the extracts and not even look at it. So it all depends on your end product and like what you're really going for. Because a lot of those mega grows, they still can't compete with a craft cultivation. So they're able to sell their product cheaper and, do their numbers like that. But a craft cultivator is still usually able to hold a higher value for their product, even though they're not producing as much.
100%. I want to echo what Morris said. Bigger is not always better. You know what I mean? So some of the smaller, like I work with companies that have 200 lights and I work with companies that have 12. I'm going to tell you that 12 lighter is way better than that 200 lighter. You know what I mean? There's no way that they're able to touch every plant like the guy with the 12 lighter can. Same goes for outdoor. We got, like Morris said, there's cottage and then there's, small farms. So I consider a small farm anywhere from 10,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. And some of the best outdoor that I've got are the 5,000 square foot farms. Those 1 acre farms it's all right, but they're not touching every plant. That dude on that 5,000 square foot, he's touching, talking, singing, drinking coffee with those plants every morning. And that makes a difference.
I definitely can attest to that working at Trulieve because we work on tables all the time. There's like 60 plants on each table and we can't get to all 60 of them while the table is rotating. It's just not possible, But I asked that question because I was talking to the plant health guy and he was just saying how Trulieve needs to do this, needs to do that because they're still learning how to mass produce and they're trying to work out the kinks. So thank you guys.
Well, another thing, like in an operation your size, is that you can't afford to slow down. You can't afford to miss a harvest. So even if it's not right, it's still got to go on. So it's it's just one of those beasts.
And that's kind of part of what's going on right now in California with the supply chain. Like Morris said, they're not turning those lights off. So that batch got to go. It's got to sell before this next one comes. And if we got to drop the price to get it out, then that's what we do. And that's kind of been hurting the market for us.
Yeah, there's like 8,000 plants in one room. So you like, again, just keep on going.
I have a question for all of you. Oh, sorry. Is there another question?
I always get invited. Can I have a seat?
I have a question for all of you. Mo, I think that you're someone in the background. What's going on with Atlanta? Is there anything happening with licenses out there that anyone's heard of? Caleb, that's primarily for you, and Kyra.
Hi, everybody. My name is Caleb Sproul, and I'm a junior at Morehouse College in Atlanta. But I haven't heard anything about anything new about any licenses or anything recently. But Kyra, have you heard anything?
No, I haven't heard anything either.
Are there any like nonprofit groups that are beginning to work on that at all, or lobbying for that? Or no, that you haven't seen?
I mean, I know we can hop in really quickly and say M4MM is down there. Shout out to
Okay.
DJ. Additionally, I know there's a normal chapter, like I think Peachtree Normal somewhere over there. Georgia hasn't had a ton of a lot going on because it's a very strict medical market where
Yeah.
a lot of the universities are teaming up with the operators. So I believe like Morehouse is teamed up with one of the operators, like they have to jointly apply together or something like that.
Interesting.
So I am connected with Dr. Standifer, who's at Morehouse School of Medicine, who's been doing her best to try to keep abreast and get the community involved.
Very cool.